Hey guys, we're going to be playing a rapid game, and we're going to provide analysis, commentary while we're playing, and analysis when we finish. So here we have d4. Opponent chooses to go for knight f6, wants to be patient, wants to wait for whether I play knight f3 or c4. Okay, gonna go for King's Indian or Grunfeld potentially. Play knight c3, see if he wants to go for Grunfeld. He does. I'm going to play knight f3, waiting move. He's going to play bishop g7 or c6. So he goes for the c6 Grunfeld. Okay. I could play g3 and play symmetrical. Or I could play queen b3. Or I could capture. He captures. And then I bring my bishop to f4. Kind of like that idea. I could bring my queen to b3. I think I will capture. I want to simplify the position a little bit. He's going to play c takes d5. We have bishop f4 on the nice long diagonal. And we'll just develop e3. We might see bishop f5. Trying to get it out of the pawn chain. We'll play bishop to d3. Get bishop g4. We can play h3. And then provoke a capture. We get the double bishop. I think we can do that. Develop my queen. So this knight might be a little vulnerable, which I like. We could see bishop here or here, forcing this queen to stay. He might play knight bd7 though. Let's wait for him to play knight c6, then we can play bishop g5. And then he won't be able to, he will constantly have to keep that queen on e7 or d8. In the meantime, we will play rook here so that we can bring our bishop back. And if he plays knight c, if he plays knight c6, then knight b5, we can tuck our bishop behind the rook instead of blocking it. That's why I didn't choose to bring this rook here. And it's also putting it on an open file. So good, he played knight c6. I think bishop g5, h3. If I go back, provoking g5, I think might be good because that will weaken his pawn structure. It will force him to open up the king side where his king is. I could play knight here and potentially get on the dark square here. So I want to play bishop g5. Yep. Because now that the knight is on c6, it can't come to d7 and defend. And so this queen has to stay. He's probably going to develop his queen to e7. But if he plays h6, yep, I'm provoking h6. My queen and bishop are putting pressure on the knight. Therefore, I have two attackers, two defenders. He cannot move his queen. He has to keep it defending. Now his queen is tied up, and my pieces are putting pressure, which I like very much. He might play e5, because now that I played bishop g5, I gave up control of e5. But I could play bishop takes on f6. After bishop takes on f6, I could play knight takes d5, and now I'm threatening the bishop. He doesn't have time to capture. He might move it back, and then I could take. And after he takes, yep, he's playing g5, weakening the structure. This is a positional win for me. My position is, it's honestly, nothing is wrong about my position. This is what I like. Positional, semi-closed games where one or two weaknesses, right, that I can exploit. Not an open game where it's imbalanced. Both players have pros and cons. No, I have the pros, he has the cons. I have the 2 bishops. He has the worst pawn structure. I have the 2 bishops, a better pawn structure, and I have developed rook. Yeah, I'm liking my position. He can't really play e5. That isolates this pawn. I could take. I could actually take this way, this way. I could actually take this way, and if he takes, I could play my queen f5. This, then I could threaten knight takes. But he might actually take the bishop. So I could play knight. I could play here. Think so. He could potentially bring his queen here for some activity. And I want to know how to defend this pawn. So I want to play a3 to protect b4. I don't want his queen to be active. Now I can play knight f5 and invade. So that is what I'm going to do. And it's protected by the rook. So let's say I wanted to invade, but this rook wasn't here. He could play e5, distract this pawn. So that's a good move. He's protecting. I believe I could bring my bishop back. So knight a5, but I want him to play b5 first. I don't want to put my knight there right away. There is no need to. I don't need to rush it. And now that his knight is on f6, if he plays e5, I could play queen f4, f5, threaten checkmate. He might take, sure, but I think just developing my rook is perfectly fine. Good. It's provoked. It's what I prefer. Now he has a backwards pawn. I will definitely take. If he plays e5, I could actually play bishop f5, threaten the rook. It opens up his light squares, so I don't know if he actually wants to play bishop e5. I have to play one of my pieces there if he plays e5, because I can't take. This rook will be undefended, but if I do play b5, then I could definitely take. I need to play either. Yeah, I definitely need to play b5. So in order to protect my rook. So he could actually take and take. And I take. No. He could take. I take. He takes. I put it here. He captures. This knight is protected. So let's say he takes. I can actually take the knight preemptively, then take here. And I have the 2 bishops for 1 rook. I think that's much better for me. And this bishop is a key defender of the king. His king is more vulnerable. I have the 2 bishops that could potentially attack him. So I think capturing on d5 to get my rook won't help him. If he captures with the knight, obviously I have to take with the pawn. Otherwise I lose my queen. And if he takes with the bishop, I could trade. And he just loses a piece. So I think he was looking at taking with the bishop, but I do not think that worked for him. Because I could take the knight. And then after he takes, I take. He cannot invade on c2, which is important. He could invade on c1, but that wouldn't really help. I have my bishops are going to be doing very well. If he tries to open up the position, it will benefit me, not him, because I have the 2 bishops. I think he should keep it closed. And he has a backwards pawn. This knight is not This knight is not an outpost. It's not protected by a pawn. So he really needs to do something about it. He should probably get it to d6. So maybe here. Then if I take, I probably won't. He could recapture, put his knight on d6. Then maybe f5, clamp down on e4. That's what I do. Because he has a backwards pawn here. This pawn he should not have advanced. Because now, oh, okay, so he's going to do it. If I take, he will take. And my rook and knight are under attack. And if I try and go here, and then he'll just play f5. So I want to take. I think it's better for me, 100%. It's important that my light square bishop covers c4 and c2. Those are my very vulnerable squares. So he's going to expand with f5. I think that I would do the same thing if I were him. Okay. I could. So I could get my bishop to e5. I think if I play queen h5, he will actually play here. And he has it h7 defended. And then my bishop is blocked. It won't be able to participate. So I think I really need to get it to e5. It's on an outpost. It's looking beautifully down 2 diagonals directly into black's camp. This bishop here, these 2 bishops are very dangerous in my opinion. He can play rook there. That is not going to do anything. I could play queen here. I think I want to attack on the king side. I think I do have an attack on the king side. I will definitely play queen here. He needs to defend h6 somehow. And if he plays here, I'm going to play g4. If he plays here, well, I'll still play g4 because my bishop, I can open it up. I could play f4 and then take, because if I play f4, he takes. I could play bishop here to recapture, and then he won't be able to play here. If I play here, if I play g4, he doesn't have to take. g4, take. It doesn't accomplish anything, but I think playing here, that's just a bad move, because then I have, if I take, he takes, I play here, and he keeps his rook on this rank, I have checkmate on e8. So I don't have to worry about do not have to worry about the rook coming down to c1. He cannot put it there, and that's a bad move. Unless he puts his rook back, if he puts his rook back there, that's fine, but there really is no point in playing rook c1. He needs to defend e8. Now that his queen is on h7, he overstretches pawns, so it's not a good decision by him, overstretching your pawns like this. Okay, so he actually takes. What to do? So I could play here. Okay, for sure he can't play because I'll just take. But what is he doing? He's defending. But what if I play? If I keep it like this, I'll just play check because I need to play move. But g4. Definitely play g4. Yeah, I'm expanding my pawns, but the thing is, I have my bishops. He only has his rooks are on the queen side. My bishops can help protect on the king side, and he can't take because I take, and he cannot play rook c1. There's absolutely no way. That is a bad move. Not a good move. And that's checkmate. Wow, okay. So, let's look at that. Let's look at this game. So we have versus Murkadradin. I forgot to mention him, give some attention to him, but so we were white. We played d4 knight f6. So he went I think his mistake was going for the c6 Grunfeld. He should have waited. Knight f3 is basically like a waiting move. You can still play bishop g7. He should have waited for me to decide on what variation to play, because when you're playing the Grunfeld, c6, if you want to play the c6 variation, you could just done c6 and then d5. That's just my advice. If you actually know the Grunfeld variations, you don't want to play c6 because that gives your cards away. You want to keep your you want to welcome this trade because that's what the Grunfeld is for. You want activity. You want to pressure White's center that he builds up. But he plays c6. It's a fine move. I take because, and my argument is that my pawn structure is better because he has his pawn on g6, and he's going to play his bishop to g7. But he's also, at some point in the future, going to have to move the e pawn, I think. And that's going to weaken his dark squares even further. Because my pawn g2 stays here, it guards light squares. So my light square bishop can come to d3, where I think it can put pressure down this diagonal. I don't think that in these types of closed positions, when you don't have the c pawn available and you have your bishop on g7, it's really not going to be doing much. It's not going to have that much activity down the h8 to a1 diagonal. There is no pressure you can put on White's center. You don't have that c pawn to, maybe if White takes, now you have an open diagonal. But the only way to pressure this pawn is to play e5. And sure, you can play knight h5, try and get that dark square bishop. Then you open up your bishop, you put your knight on c6, e5. But the thing is that now it weakens your dark squares even further, and you have an isolated d pawn, and it's different than in a queen's gambit position, where usually when you want to play e5, you would have had some trade on c4 where White plays bishop e3 and then bishop c4 again. But White has a super solid structure, and his bishop is very active. You can put the bishop here, but sometimes it can get trapped with h3 and h3, e3, and after you play e6, this bishop wouldn't have anywhere to go. After g4, it could probably come to e4, but then you could just take, and yes, the pawn would capture this way, but you'd have the double bishop. So it's really like I would have wanted to, if I was him, I would just not play the Slav fianchetto structure. He plays a6. After bishop f4, I'm targeting c7, and he doesn't want me to play knight b5, which is fine. If I was black, I would just develop, get ready to castle. If I play knight b5, well, you can just actually give a check, and I'd have to bring my knight back, because this bishop is not defending the knight. So if I bishop g7, knight b5, queen a7, I'd have to bring it back. And then he could actually put some pressure on my knight, and it would be better for black. I would have wasted a move, and now this bishop is open. So a6, again, it's not a bad move. It's just that you don't want to. It's a pawn move. Is the point? Is that you don't want to make unnecessary pawn moves. So you've already given up control of b6 too early. You don't want to play pawn moves too early. You want to leave suspense for where you're going to put your pawns. So maybe this pawn could come to a5 later. Like, even if you think that, oh, sometime in the future it's going to go to the square, so I'm going to put that pawn there immediately. You want to wait. You want to make non-committal make moves that are expected but not committal. So developing your my bishop, for example, to f4. Obviously, I could have developed g5. I could have waited, but I think that, it's not a committal move. I could reposition this bishop, and I'm gonna get out of the pawn chain anyway. But again, fine move. It's a good move. So we keep playing e3. Now I'm gonna develop my light square bishop. bishop d3. If this bishop comes to g5, I would be fine with taking, and then if he takes, I understand he would have a clamp down on e4, but if he has a clamp down on e4, that's fine with me. I have a clamp down on e5, and he has doubled pawns. So yes, it helps him control the center, but I think that my dark square bishop cannot be bothered by g5 anymore. It stays on the diagonal unless he wants to attack it that way, but I think that the doubled pawns would not be helpful. So he doesn't want to play bishop f5, he plays bishop g4. And I welcome the trade, even though usually black's light square bishop is bad. I fully welcome the trade, because now I have the double bishop, and my double bishops, my queen and knight are pressuring this, and I have potential pressure on the f-file, and I have double bishop, and h3 is always a helpful move. I could bring my bishop back. When I castle, I have an escape square. I welcomed bishop to g4. If I was black, I would actually play bishop to f5, because white's large square bishop is very good. So we have e6. So now I see this as an opportunity. I know that he can't really put his pawns on dark squares anymore. No pawn is on a dark square. This bishop has a lot more pressure. Like he relies more on the dark square bishop to control dark squares. Now I understand that, you know, when you have one bishop left, you want to put your pawns all on the opposite square, color square, so that this bishop can have free reign. But if that bishop gets traded, then you're really gonna have a tough time on the dark squares. So I castle, rook here, and bring my bishop back. If he plays knight c6, knight b5, I always want to bring it back. And now, this is where I think he made a mistake. Knight c6 gives your cards away in terms of f6. Now, I know that the knight is not going to come to d7. And now, I see this as an opportunity to play bishop g5. Bishop g5. His queen is pinned. Right? If I played bishop g5 right away, he could have played knight bd7, and his queen could go wherever it wants. Then it would be a pointless move to play of bishop g5. But because he played knight c6, he can't move this queen. He has to stay defending it. And the only way out is to play h6 g5, which he did play, but that, as we saw, that opened up his king, and I was able to invade with my queen and checkmate on e8. So knight c6, crucial move. Usually when you're developing your pieces, you just mindlessly play your piece to a square because you're like, okay, it's c6, knight goes on c6. But you really want to think, what can white do? And white can now pin the knight to the queen, and black is having a tough time getting, like, he wants to use the queen, and he wants to use the knight, and this queen now has to stay defending the knight for the whole game, basically, up until it gets traded. If h6, obviously he realizes that's the only way to get out. He's like, you know what, I'll play h6 g5, and I'll try and get compensation, space on the king side. Now my queen has free reign. He wants to enter b4. I'll play a3, not going to let that happen. Now I have a hole on what is it, b3. He could play knight a5, and if I play b4, then he could actually come to c4, but I don't think that would happen. He could come to b3, and if I play rook here, he could actually fork. So he could have actually said, you know what, he lost control of this square, but he never played it, and I think maybe I could have potentially just, instead of reacting to this move, just play knight a5, and if he comes to c4, I take. If he comes to b3, well, I can just play rook here. Actually, I could play rook c2, guard this square, double up. I could bring my queen back. I could also play not b3. I could put my bishop on e5, and then maybe trade this bishop. So ups and downs to every move. It would have been interesting to see him try and get his knight to b3. but he doesn't. He just develops his rook. Okay, I need to do something with this knight. This bishop is doing fine. This bishop is doing fine. I need to improve the knight and open the rook. I want to play to b6 or c5. Either move is fine. I attack here, and he has to tread very carefully in terms of my dark square bishop. Knight d7, good move. Reacting to my move, saying you're not going to get to play your move to b6 or c5 that easily, and he's opening up his bishop, potentially playing f5. Again, weakening move, but it does gain space. I would have probably played queen h5, but he could bring his knight back, and then I would have to retreat. And actually, an important part of the game is that we actually trade knights. We actually traded knights, so I think that because he traded this knight off, I was able to come to h5 and not be punished for it. Yeah, I think that was a mistake, trading this knight off. So I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to play this in the future. I'm going to play knight c5. I'm not going to bring it back and waste a move. I'm not going to rush it. I'm not going to be like, rush my knight into c5. It's going to get traded off. So I'll wait for him to play b5, then I'll put my knight, because I'm going to do it anyway. And it's better if he wastes a move trying to force me to push my plan forward anyway. So I develop my rook. I anticipate, because this diagonal is open, he might play e5 to try and open up the position for his bishop. So I anticipate a trade on e5, and then the file being open, and potentially playing against this pawn. He doesn't play e5, he plays b5. He forces me to continue the plan that I was going to do anyway. Never force your opponent to continue with this plan. Like, I understand that his plan was to do something with d5 after playing b4, forcing my knight to c5. But let's say he knew that this variation wouldn't work. You don't want to force your opponents to put their pieces in better squares. Let the knight sit on the edge. It's not doing much. Like, if you're black, you're thinking, okay, you know what? I'm not going to force him to put his knight on c5. The knight is on the edge of the board. It's not doing much. I'll let it sit there. That's white wants it there. I'll let it sit there. He should have probably developed his rook, and then maybe play his knight to f8, g6. Then he'd have some control of the dark squares. Or actually no. Obviously he'd lose control of these squares, but he should have done something else. I mean, I don't know what he would have done. Maybe f6 or f5. But again, actually, yeah, f6 or maybe f5, because I can't play queen h5. He'll play knight back to f6. I'll be forced back, and he'd gain space on the king side and clamp down on e5. So maybe f5 would have been the move. But he forces me to continue my plan. He's like, you know what? I don't want you to. I wasn't even thinking about this, but now I see that maybe the knight could come to d6. He wants to trade, and he says, you know what? If you take, I'll take. Your queen's under attack, and I'll get the rook and protect my knight. Then I say, you know what? I'll just take the knight. You take the rook, and now I get two pieces. Like a knight and a bishop, 6 points. He gets a rook and a pawn, 6 points. But my double bishop are unopposed. No light square bishop to oppose this one. No dark square bishop to oppose this one. I have the double bishop. 2 bishops are always better than 1 rook. That's just plainly obvious. Even though he has an extra pawn, his pawn structure is very weak. I have an isolated queen's pawn, but I don't think he'll be able to attack it. With the fact that I'm controlling c4, I could play my bishop to e5 and clamp the defense down. Yeah, and he has just weak pawn structure, in my opinion. I could easily exploit that with my 2 bishops. So he plays f5. He should have done that before, where he could put a piece on e5. There's really no point in playing f5. Now I can. Obviously, he wants to trap my bishop, but I can see that he wants to do that, so I'll just play my bishop to e5. Now, his pawn can't attack my dark square bishop. Nothing can take it. It is a good piece, and it can't be touched. It literally can't be touched. And not only that, my light square bishop is putting pressure on his pawns. And he brings his rook here with the plan of putting his rook on c1, but it really doesn't do anything, because I can attack his king. Now we have f4. He takes, I take. and I bring my bishop back, and I play g4. He knows that if he takes, I'll take the queen, so it's pinned. And I want to take, and then fork, and I want to open up the king side again. My bishops are doing fantastic staring down the king side. I could actually put my king here. This is guarded, and then I could put my rook on g1 and just, yeah, I'm gonna checkmate him. So here we have rook c1. If I take, he takes, I move my king. He needs to bring it back to defend e8, because I can bring my queen to e8, and it's checkmate. But he takes, he doesn't realize he's playing rook. He wants to attack my bishop, and he thinks that it's trapped. If I bring it here, he'll check. If I bring it here, he'll take. If I bring it here, he'll pin it. But he doesn't see that I've checkmate on e8 because his queen on a7, blocking the getaway scheme. Checkmate. Hope you guys enjoyed this rapid game with the analysis, Grunfeld Slav variation, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.